I'll give everyone like an extra minute just in case anyone creeps in at last minute. But how many of you guys have done iOS work before? But Objective-C, Xamarin, Swift?
No, Xamarin.
All right. Objective-C. What about Android? Android does? A little bit of everyone. Java? Xamarin? All right. Oh, nice. Java? Objective-C? Java? Cool. We got a little mix of everybody. So I've done them all. So you gotta do them all. I'm gonna demo primarily everything in C#. Java devs. You just uppercase a few things, lowercase. You're good, right? Yeah, fine. The code's so straightforward. It's really the great part of why I love this session is that it's really not about the code. It's really about what you can do with this technology that really makes it intriguing to me when it comes to Ibeacons. And what was really intriguing, why I love giving this talk and why I started giving this talk, is I went to Disney World when I was really young, like 8 years old, and I don't remember anything about it. I remember this like crazy alien type thing like that I was on, and that's about it because it scared me to death. But I got to go back as a 28-year-old, and like everything about the Magic Kingdom changed my mind, like how technology can improve a park-going experience. I'm a huge roller coaster buff. Like I love going to amusement parks. And as I entered the Magic Kingdom, like a whole new world of technology opened to me. They had these like augmented reality card games that you could become a superhero and you could like take them and scan them and like battle supervillains and like villains across all of the Magic Kingdom. It was mind-blowing. They had the app that was there. That of course everyone had that. It was like posted on like every single sign to download their app because they wanted to know information about you. And it was great because you have an interactive map with your GPS location, and it tells you wait times and all this information. But I thought there was one thing missing from this entire experience, was that I wasn't getting any contextual information about where I was at in the park. I downloaded the app, they knew where I was at, they knew kind of where I was going. So why, for instance, if I went on Star Tours, because I'm a huge Star Wars fan, 8 times in a single day, why don't they tell me as I exit the ride that, hey, the Ewoks are on sale right now, you get 25% off. Like that would be pretty amazing. That is the exact information that I need to where I'm at right now. And that's something you can't really do with the GPS. There's no way that indoor tracking location on GPS will tell you exactly where you're at, where you're moving around. But that's what Ibeacons can do. And that's where I thought this is what needs to be rolled out, like in every single amusement park in the entire world, really. So I'm going to give you a complete overview of what Ibeacons are, how you can implement them in all your applications, and real-world examples. And then I'm not even going to stop at just Ibeacons. I'm going to talk about a new product from Estimo, who's a leader in Ibeacon technology. They're stickers, which are brand new. Hardly anyone has these, and they're amazing. If you ask a really great question, maybe I'll give you one. So first off, I always like to say, like, what is an Ibeacon? It's always the first question everyone asks me when I start to give this talk. Well, it's simple. I mean, it's a patent pending trademark from Apple. Like that's the logo. It looks nice. But really, Apple says it's one thing, which is that it's this class of low-powered, low-cost transmitters that can notify iOS devices of their presence. I just read it. That's all I did. But that's interesting. Low-cost, low-power devices transmitting data. Kind of sounds like NFC a little bit. It's not at all. It's completely different. I think this is an extremely misleading statement, especially in the fact that it can only be iOS devices. This is what it says on their website. What I like to say is that these are devices that can notify any app that we're creating as app developers of their approximation and kind of location awareness of where we place them. That really was never before possible with NFC, with a GPS. Whether you're indoors, you're outdoors, you're walking around Disney World, it doesn't matter. Ibeacons are devices, but they're actually a little bit more than that, because I like to break it down into 2 segments. The device itself are these devices that we're seeing up here, these little tiny beacons that are up there, and they're physical devices that you place somewhere, anywhere that you want. And it's transmitting data. And that data is being consumed by the application that we're creating. And the Ibeacon API is what enables us to actually detect these beacons and do something with the information that the API gives us back. So in our iOS or Android applications, we add the SDK, add the API, and we're able now to detect these beacons that we placed strategically, whatever type of application we might be creating. So the devices themselves, there's tons of them. One, if you don't want to buy a device and you already have an iPhone, any iPhone device running iOS 7 Plus can be an Ibeacon. It's built into the API, actually, inside of core Bluetooth, that actually enables you to turn your device into a beacon. That'd be a very expensive beacon. I don't recommend that. But if you just want to get up and running and testing, you're able to do that. There's also a hack for the Mac that you can do that as well, because it's just core Bluetooth under the hood. But even the iPod Touch 5th gen up, any of these that have Bluetooth LE are enabled to become a beacon. But ideally, that's really not what you're going to be using. You're going to use these cute little devices, and there's a lot of them. There's like tens of hundreds probably of different beacon vendors at this point. Estimates was kind of the first ones on the market. They were a Kickstarter program, and they're over in, I want to say Norway or Sweden. I think Sweden. They're a company out of there. They make these amazing beacons that stick to stuff. They last about 2 years or so, just on an internal cell battery. But the beacons come in a wide variety of different power sources. Some are USB powered. Some, again, are battery powered. Some are rechargeable battery powered. It's kind of up to the vendor and the kind of price that they're targeting. And these are probably the most popular ones, I would say: Estimotes, Radius, Onyx, and Roximity. But there's tons of them out there. And in fact, some of the vendors are exclusive, that they only sell beacons to app creators that are deploying them like on large scale. But in general, these are kind of the ones that I go to and I've really enjoyed working with. So that's kind of like my recommendations on the beacons. But really, we're interested in how they work, what we're going to be doing with them. And all of beacons all run on Bluetooth Smart technology. And this is really important, because we've always had Bluetooth in our devices, and it's been only used for what? Like, cellular voice calls. Like, that's about it. Like, that's the best. You can be streaming music. But the problem with Bluetooth has always been it's very power heavy. It always consumes a lot of consumption of battery. So even though I have wireless headphones, when I get on a plane, I still just plug it in because I don't want to drain the battery on the entire 9-hour flight from Seattle. So some fun statistics of why this is important, why they run on smart technology, is classic Bluetooth has a really long range, actually. It's like 100 meters or so, and it has a really large throughput. And what's really nice about Bluetooth Low Energy is that while it's not the largest of distance, it's still about 50 meters, that we can see the actual power consumption, instead of 1 milliwatt, 0.01 to 0.5 milliwatts. So that means it's 100th of the actual power consumption of a normal Bluetooth device. Now this means something really important for us as developers. This means that our app isn't going to show up as something draining our battery of our users' devices. And it means that we also get to have these cool little devices that can use Bluetooth Low Energy that can now last for years on end, just on a single little cell battery, which is really cool. However, one thing to really be aware of, because Bluetooth Low Energy is kind of everywhere, including Apple Watch and Android Wear in general, is the actual throughput. So we can see that the throughput has also been dramatically cut from anywhere from 2.1 to 0.27 megabits per second. So you're not transmitting a lot of data. That's important. So you can't do voice over Bluetooth Low Energy. It doesn't make any sense. So most Fitbits and little small, like little applications are transmitting really tiny bits of data, and that's really important. And that's what Ibeacons do. They transmit tiny little bits of information. And this is what they do. In fact, they only do 3 bits of data. Its entire goal in life is to transmit 3 pieces of data. First is a UUID. So it's a unique identifier, just like an NSUUID. And it's just a GUID. That's all it is. Now this GUID that's there, the UUID, they're programmable. Every vendor has and registers their own unique ID. So if you go and buy an Estimo beacon or a different beacon, they're going to have different IDs. Ideally, you'll reprogram those to be your unique ID. So I'm this developer, I'm rolling out to Tesco or to Target or something like that. That's going to be my entire company's ID. So the beacons kind of have that information. Then it has regions codes. And there are some shorts, some integers, And all they do is have a major number and a minor number. So how would you actually use these? And this actually is from Apple, how their chart of how they think you should use it. Their idea is, let's say they are rolling it out into Apple stores, which they have. Well, they have their unique identifier of this long GUID, and then they have stores in Paris, London, and San Francisco. So ideally, when you're rolling this out, you have a major number. So your major number in this case in retail might be that specific store location, right? So even if you have San Francisco and there's 8 of them, they probably all wouldn't be 1. They'd be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. But it's an assigned number that you know that this is a specific location. So for instance, this might be DevWeek, for instance. And if they do another conference, it might be a different conference. Then the minor number is any other number that you assign to it. So these are all programmable. And then for instance here, it might be a clothing department, household wares, and automotives, kind of as a reference to what these numbers could mean. But they could mean anything to you. You can use the defaults out of the system, or you can reprogram all the different devices, which is really cool. One thing that's really important is that a lot of people are confused, and I think this is my most important slide of what Ibeacons don't do. They don't send push notifications to devices. There's no two-way communication channel between them. They don't track your users at all. A lot of people get like, well, we have these beacons and you're going to track your users around. They don't do any of that. They literally sit there and they just yell and they're like, hey, I'm here. Like, someone find me. That's it. They don't ever expect to have a response. There's no communication back unless you're programming them as a developer. But to the consumer, they don't even know they're there, nor should they. That's the entire purpose of them. So the purpose of it is for us as developers to get detection when I get close or in the region of one of these beacons. But again, they do not do any of this stuff. They really don't do anything besides transmit those 3 pieces of data. So the API is actually really simple. On iOS, we're going to start with iOS, and we're going to go to Android in a little bit, and then we'll talk about the stickers. So there's tons of SDKs out there. All these different vendors, from Estimo to Beacon is another one. They have all these great SDKs. However, it's actually just built into core location. The entire API is built when it was released in iOS 7. So to do all of this, you don't actually need to use any specific component or SDK. One nicety, though, is that some of these SDKs actually make it easier when it comes to permissions, or just gives you a nice overall, well, this is the API for iOS and Android. So you don't have to learn 2 different APIs, you just learn one. And most of these SDKs are just wrapping the core location APIs for you, so it's really nothing too special at that point. But there's tons of them out there. I usually use just the iOS core location APIs on iOS, and that's what I'll be demoing today. And then on Android, I always use some other ones that we'll talk about later. But just so you know, it's built out of the box on iOS. So from the API point of view, there's going to be 2 things that we're going to do as developers. We're either going to do some region monitoring or ranging. This is the terminology that we use when it comes to beacons. And again, remember that these beacons are transmitting this data: UUID, major, minor number. That's it. That's all they care about. So first, region monitoring is on the premise of those major and minor numbers. That's a region. Those major and minor numbers represent a region. And you can have it for just a major number or just a minor number. So that's how you specify our region. So maybe you want region 1, or you want region 1 with a minor number of 10. So for instance, this might be UUID 110. And a region monitoring works in the background. All it means, if I take a generic phone, it's not plugged in, that one is. So a region monitor says, this guy has a range, and you can amplify or move up and down the power level of how far it can transmit. So it could be up to 50 meters. For instance, I might be out of range right now. And if I walk in range, my application on my iOS device, on here, my iOS device, gets a notification that I've entered a region. Right? So I've entered a department store, I've entered DevWeek. I leave DevWeek at the end of the day, I get another notification that I've left. Exit, enter. Very simple. That's all it does. What's great about this is it works under the lock screen, it works in the background, it works if your app has been killed, and it gives you a point in time to actually pop up a notification, a local notification to your user. So it's actually like you're processing an incoming remote notification from a push server, if you will. So it's really interesting. It's a special API. That's what's really cool about core location is Apple's made it so it's like this special, unique, under the hood, because you can't normally do this in iOS applications. They sneak it in there to get access to doing things like this. So this is a good example that Estimo gives of maybe I've walked into a shoe store and there's a sale going on right now. So it loads that up, gives me a notification, I swipe, I enter right to that location, which is pretty cool. So region monitoring is a little bit different though. And this is my favorite part of Ibeacons. I like the background notifications and doing specific things with it. But this is active beacon scanning. So this really only works in the foreground because once you close your application, it's going to be dead. On Android, it's a magical world of Android. You can do anything. So of course, you can do anything. But on iOS, it only works in the foreground. And the idea is it's really based on this proximity that we're going to talk about. And the proximity in the API returns to us as an enum. It gives us if we're immediately close to the beacon, so that's normally held right up to it, so I'm right on it, or I'm near 1 to 3 meters away, far, like I'm just in the detection range, and then unknown. For some reason, just the Bluetooth isn't working well and it can't really figure things out. Additionally, though, the API will attempt. It can only do its best, but it can attempt to give you this magical word called accuracy, which is not accuracy at all. It's actually the meters away from the beacon that it's estimated. So you do get these. Like this is the number that we want to use primarily. How close am I to the beacon? Am I near? Am I far away? And then do something based on that information. But you do additionally get this accuracy number that we'll see in demo form. But it's a rough approximation because it's all Bluetooth LE. So if you're walking fast, it can only update so often. And that's what's actually important. That it gives you these rough approximations of immediate, near, and far because a beacon isn't sending and pulsating every millisecond. It shouldn't because it will drain its battery. It's pulsating at maybe every second, half second, here or there. And then as you're scanning, iOS will just scan whenever it really wants to, which is usually every second or so. So the combination of those two, and it kind of picks those up and bundles them and batches what it's found together and returns those to you in the API. So that's why they always recommend just using this rough approximation of how close you are, which is pretty cool. So before we go into demos, there's some things that can find beacons and can't find beacons. We're going to take a look at everything that can find a beacon. So any iOS device, 7 or plus, can find beacons because Bluetooth Low Energy has been built in to those devices for a long, long time now. The Android story is a little bit interesting. So as you're developing applications and you want to roll out on Android, technically the Bluetooth Low Energy stack was finalized in Android 4.3, which is a pretty large percent of the market at this point. I think it's got to be at least 50 or 60, if not 70% at this point. However, these devices also actually have to have Bluetooth Low Energy. There's like 20,000 different Android devices out there. And a lot of them just upgrade along the way, but they might not have the Bluetooth Smart Low Energy chip in them. So we can do checks on permissions of all of these to ensure that Bluetooth is on, that Bluetooth is actually on the device and is working properly. Unfortunately, when it comes to Windows, there's really nothing in the APIs as far as 8. I haven't looked at 10 at this point. Bluetooth Low Energy works on those devices and exists. However, the APIs that Microsoft has exposed for Bluetooth and Bluetooth Low Energy always require a pairing process, which doesn't quite work for beacons. I don't think you'd want to tell everyone to try to pair with every single beacon. That wouldn't make any sense. And there's no SDKs as far as I know for Windows phones. So we're going to primarily focus on iOS and Android. So I want to get up, kind of show you guys iOS, how you would do it. Now I'm going to be demoing everything in C#. I'm also later going to take a look at some Objective-C code. I'm a developer evangelist at Xamarin. I've been a mobile developer for over 4 years, building apps on iOS, Android, Windows Phone, Windows Store, desktop, and I've been a .NET developer forever. I primarily do everything in Xamarin Studio and C#. The API is relatively pretty simple, so Objective-C, guys, you'll figure it out really quickly. Especially if you've done any Swift work, it's going to look pretty similar. We'll take a look at Android. We'll do it in C#. Again, it's going to be super simple. It's all uppercased. And then we will look at some Objective-C. So this isn't a Xamarin talk per se, but it's more focused on that. Now, how many people don't know what Xamarin is? Okay, cool. Then I can slip this. You can go ahead and forget this one slide here. But so our API and our SDKs are going to be up in this bit up here. And in this demo, I don't really have any shared C# backend that I'm doing. But what is unique and why actually the apps that I build with Xamarin is because I can take all my business logic, put it down in my shared C# backend. So let's say I'm building a game or something like this, which I'll show later. I can actually put all that logic once and then register uniquely on iOS and Android. So that's Xamarin in general. Let's go ahead and just demo some iOS stuff. And feel free if you guys have any questions at any time, let me know. Cool. So I got my iOS device here. It's a 5S with Bluetooth hopefully on. There we go. And the one thing to definitely be aware of, this does not work in the simulator because it's a simulator in general. So that's kind of a one gotcha when you're actually developing with Ibeacons. You always have to be on a physical device. I think as Android devs, we've kind of been used to that. On iOS, the simulator is pretty much amazing. However, it doesn't have all the APIs because it's a simulator with a physical device. One thing I haven't tried is actually enabling like Ibeacon support on my Mac and then seeing if that all works. I don't really know. That'd be kind of crazy. So I'm just going to show you my storyboard. It's in here. It's going to be the most beautiful storyboard that you guys have ever seen, but we'll use it in the context of this is a demo. So it's just going to be a single page application, and we'll talk about kind of like this other segue that I have here. So it's just two labels. We're going to use this main label here. Let's see what I called it, my properties. So this is label beacon, and this is label distance, so we'll use it as accuracy. So all I want to do is just kind of put a number of how many beacons it found, and we'll change the background color of the view for like accuracy and things like that in there. And that's going to be pretty cool. And then we'll take a look at maybe how we could do some gamification with the beacons. But let's just go ahead and do a little code behind here. So a little bit preface here is that to enable Ibeacon support, you have to do a few things. You have to go into your info plist, and I'm going to go into the source. And there's one specific property, or there's two actually, that I'll go over. We'll want to set our NS location when in use usage description, which is a beautiful, beautiful name that Apple gave to this. And for iOS 8 specifically, and I'll go over this in slides as well because they're there for you, they require that you request permission when using Ibeacons. In iOS 7, it was a wonderful world. We could do whatever we wanted. But in iOS 8, they said no. And in fact, Ibeacon applications are also fall into that restriction of if you use iOS and like if something's using your location, you restart your phone, it's like, hey, this application's using your location. Do you still want it to be able to use your location? Of course I do. So the applications that use Ibeacon only, since they fall under core location, you have to set this flag. And this is the string that will be displayed to your users the first time they run your application. So we've done that. Now, all I'm doing here inside of the actual logic is I've used core location, so it's my using statement. I brought in core location, and I'm inside of my UI view controller. Nothing special. To actually use the API, we're going to use the core location Locationmanager. We're going to use a beacon region and a beacon manager. Or sorry, a beacon region, and that's it. And that's all we need to get started. So I've specified my UUID. This would be different if you're using different beacons. I'm using the Estimo global UUID. And we'll come back to these beacon major numbers and minor numbers later. So the first thing that we're going to do is I kind of do everything in my view did load. You don't need to actually put it in your view did load. You're using core location, so it could be in your controller. It could be anywhere. It doesn't need reference to the actual UI view controller. It's just some business logic being run, which is really nice. There is, if you're doing an Objective-C, there's a delegate that you're going to have to implement for core location to receive these notifications back. You'll see in C#, we'll just do it with an event. So first thing I'll do is I will create my core location manager. I have a nice little if check here for our current device. Make sure I'm on iOS 8. Or if I am on iOS 8, I'm going to call request when in use authorization. There are two calls, request always and request when in use. We're going to first start off with just some active beacon scanning and detect this puppy here and find this. So I'm going to request when in use authorization. And then we're going to create our beacon UUID. So inside of here, I'm just going to go ahead and change my UUID to an NSUUID because that's what the API requires. And then I'm going to create a beacon region. So a beacon region, as we can see here, is a core location beacon region. And it has a lot of overrides. I can create this simply with a proximity UUID and an identifier. This is interesting because this one call would then enable me to say, find all beacons with this only UUID. There's other overrides that let you specify only a major number, only a minor number, so you can narrow and make it as finite or as broad as you want to do this ranging. One thing of interest though is this, I'll scroll it up a little bit here so it's not at the bottom, is this identifier. This identifier is very confusing. It actually has nothing to do with the beacon at all. All this does, this identifier, is a string that you register with your region, and when you get the callback that an event has occurred, iOS passes you back that identifier so you can check it. I don't really know. Like, there's no reason for it, so don't be scared. A lot of documentation will be like, always check the ID. You can if you want to. It's very confusing. My assumption here is that you could pass in and you could range multiple regions at the same time. You might want to check the ID at that point under a single delegate callback. That would probably be the use case for it. So I'm going to pass in the beacon UUID that's in there, and then I will go ahead and pass in my identifier, which I think I just put as beacon ID. There we go. Now at this point, everything is set up and good to go, so I can come into my location manager and say there's a lot of did. There's did range beacons, did start monitoring for regions. I think if you just type in region left, region entered, we'll talk about that next. So we're going to use did range beacons. So what this does, and I'll put in the full arguments here so we can see what it's actually creating for us, is it gives us our sender, and in the delegate callback, or in our event, we get a core location region beacons, what is it, beacons, ranged event args. And what that has in it is an array of core location beacons, so all the beacons that it found, and then it returns to you the actual beacon region that you've specified. So you can actually range for multiple regions all at the same time. So what we're going to do inside of here is let's go ahead and find our first beacon. So we'll say var beacon equals our event args dot beacons dot 0. Wouldn't be a good citizen, we'll say if beacon or e dot beacons dot length equals 0. We'll just return just in case we want to throw a exception there. But now we have our beacon itself, and our beacon gives us a few things. It gives us our accuracy number, which is that distance away. It gives us the major number, the minor number, which are just NS numbers that are in there. And then it also gives us our proximity, which is an enum that you can actually use. So let's do this. Let's first simply say label. So our first beacon, let's just set the text property to say we found beacon beacons.length. So we'll just say how many beacons we found, and we'll say beacons. There we go. And then we'll say label distance. And what we'll do is we'll only just have one. I only have one beacon, so that should be just fine. But we'll set the text here of that beacon equal to beacon.accuracy. So we'll actually put out that entire accuracy number. We'll just string it there, and let's give it like a nice long number. There we go. Cool. Additionally, what we'll do here is, since that'll be a little bit shorter, we'll also go ahead and put out the beacon dot proximity, which is an enum, and we'll just string it so we'll see what that returns. Put a little bit of spacing in there. Cool. The last thing to do to use the entire API is to start ranging. So you take your location manager and you say start ranging, or start monitoring, start ranging. So again, we're ranging actively, and we'll just pass in the beacon region. Like, that's the code, like, to do all of this. Like, it's a beautiful API that sits on top of core location that enables us to like just do that really quick. So let's actually see it running. Let me go ahead and pull my iPhone up. Go ahead and debug it here. I'm just using some screen mirroring with the new QuickTime, which is pretty much awesome. Now in this instance, I should already have asked my user for permission, so I don't have to really worry about that too much. But okay, cool. So our beacon's really close. You can see I'm actually just putting it like right on top, and it's relatively close. I think it's 0.01 meters away, and that's pretty good. It's immediate. So if I start walking away, you can see already I'm near, and I'll just keep going. But we'll see it's not like immediate. It's not real time. It's relatively pretty good. See how far away the range on this is. It's like pretty good. Like that's pretty good range if you're entering. I probably have to leave. Someone knock on the door. That's pretty good. So that's a pretty good range that you could think if I have an actual beacon on that back wall, the distance you can get. And this is turned at probably 25% power right now, because I like these to last a long time. These can last anywhere from like a week all the way up to like 3 years based on your settings, if you really crank it up. So that's pretty amazing. We found one beacon with some improper English in there, put an S on the end, but that's fine. But let's do a little bit something else with it. So perhaps we might do something like this. Let me go down and actually just grab a little bit of code here. So what we'll do here, we don't need that line, is we'll go down and we can now change let's say the background color here. We'll switch case on the proximity, and we'll change the background color to give some visual elements. You can imagine in this case, we're updating the UI with the accuracy or telling someone how close or far they're going. But notice one thing about Ibeacons is it didn't give me any context of the direction I'm at. It's only region based. It's a big circle. You could, of course, use some triangulation if you were setting that up, if you detected multiple beacons in the distance to try to do that. But built into the API, there's no triangulation or anything like that built up. So now if we run this here, we should be able to see a little bit of background color changing. So there we go. We're green, pretty good. Let's see how far away we can get. So a little bit visual indication, but you can imagine as we start building on an application, we're doing a little bit more. So we're farther away. All right. So for instance, what I like to do in this type of action is I might want to direct my user to another page when I get so close or so far away. So for instance here, maybe I'm on immediate in this instance, and I want to navigate to a new page. So I can grab my storyboard code here and pop it in here. So for instance, as soon as I'm immediate, I'm here. Additionally, what you can do is maybe I want to push this navigation, and I want to say Locationmanager stop ranging beacons and pass in the beacon region. This is actually relatively important. You want to make sure that you're managing the state of, am I ranging beacons, am I not ranging beacons currently? So kind of on your view will appear, view did appear, will resign. Only scan for beacons when you need to. If your controller in the background is in memory and it's still running and you're still using power, it's kind of a bad idea. So let's see here. So now maybe I have a game where I find so many of these beacons and then boom, I navigate to a new page. So let's see if this works. But only when I'm immediate. So I'm far. See how close I can get. Oh. Hasn't actually launched over there. Let's see. Oh, it's either that or I definitely typed in the wrong storyboard ID. Because that is definitely not correct. I think it's found. view. Let's take a look at our storyboard. Take a look at our found view controller. That's what the segue is called. Helps if my demo is correct. There we go. Let's try this one more time. All right, so we should be far, far away. And if I get closer, boom, I win. So you kind of get the concept of things that you can do just by detecting if you're close or far. Now that I've stopped detecting beacons, I no longer am getting notifications immediately with this. So that's really nice. So immediately, as soon as you stop registering, you're good to go. All right, so that's ranging in a nutshell. But let's take a look at actual monitoring for a region. So I am going to go ahead and actually increase this specific beacon to say I would like to monitor for this specific beacon. This is normally how you'll do it, or maybe just a major number. So I know that this major number and minor number are 07 and 08. In fact, if I really want to, I could go ahead and output these here. So beacon, let's see here, little space, and then beacon dot major plus beacon dot minor. There we go, just to be 100% sure. So we're going to go ahead and see the beacon major and minor number. So now, instead of just doing beacon did range beacons, we can say location manager dot did or region. So there's a region entered and a region left. So we can now again go ahead and put up a few regions here. We'll say location region entered, location manager dot region left. There we go. Now your beacon region also has some additional attributes on it. So let's see, notify. There's some notify properties. So I'm pretty sure the default on all of these are true, but you can always set these just to be sure. There's a notify entry state on display, a notify on entry, and a notify on exit. So these different properties are for this specific region, and I'm just going to set them all to true just to make sure. Now this demo is a little bit tricky because it involves me again leaving the room and coming back in and hopefully magically it all working. But hey, we're doing it live, so whatever. There we go. So let me go ahead and grab my little notification code here. So I'm going to pop up a new region, like little local notification, and put that there. So in this instance, where's my, there we go. So beacon's close by when I entered a region, and then if I left a region, we'll go ahead and is far. There we go. Now, a few things I have to change here. So now this location manager has the ability to do it in the background even when the app's not running. So we're going to want to update our location manager request call. So we'll say request always an authorization. There we go. And the little blue squiggly is just reminding me that's an iOS 8 only API. In fact, if I was running on iOS 7, obviously it would crash the app, so that'd be no good if I called that. I'll head back into my info P list, and what we'll do here is we'll go ahead and add a new field, and we will go ahead and say the NS location always, say scanning in the background. You probably want to give your users a way better notification than that. It's a super scary dialogue that comes up. It's like, this app's about to track your location, are you sure? And everyone's like, no. So it's kind of like the new default for everyone is no. So I find that this is a good turnabout. And I don't think, the only other information I have here is that I added a little bit of register for notifications to pop up an alert because that's a new iOS 8 specific thing as well. Of course, I should wrap that in a bundle, but it's a demo. So let's see here, we do that. Now let's go ahead and do this here. But ideally what you'd be able to do at this point is take advantage of anything running on the system. When this region entered and the delegate and callback an event occurs, forgot one thing. So we have our region set up. Let's go ahead and remove this code. We don't need it. We'll still update the UI. we're starting to do some ranging, but we also want our location manager to start monitoring for a beacon region as well. We'll just use the same one. Gotta remember that code. So there we go. So what's nice is that your actual application can go ahead and do this at any time, whether it's dead or alive running in the background. It should be good to go. So ideally, I'm going to attempt to leave the room and come back in, and we'll see if it works. So let's try it. So as I tried to demo it on video one time, and I chucked it across the room. I'm like, well, now I got to actually leave to go get it. Let's see. We'll see if anything pops up or not. That's far. Got a bunch of other notifications. It looks like it didn't, but rest assured that's the code that makes it work in your code. I don't want to leave the room too many times, but that's definitely how it works. So, but you get the idea in general. So now you just register for a few more events, or in Objective-C terms, just another delegate, part of the delegate that you implement. And then when you enter, region, leave, you just present this notification or do whatever you want to do. It's up to you, which is great. So that's like how easy it is. It's not that much lines of code. Like it's 50 lines of code to do all of that functionality. Now it's really what you can do with this information that's really cool. So let's take a look at that. So obviously I'm just doing some demo code to show you how easy it is. And I think with this information you can actually do a lot. So for instance, maybe when I exit and enter my house, or if I want to do home automation, I enter the living room, I enter the bedroom, I turn on my lights, I turn off my lights. As a developer, we could implement that. We could create an application that gets notified based on the beacons that we're placing around. Now this is a pretty finite case because someone has to buy these beacons. Asking your users to do this is a little bit much. However, if you're a nerd like me, that's totally something that I want to do. I walk into my apartment and like I want to walk and like all my Hue light bulbs come on. Like who doesn't want that? If it's at night, put it in like night mode. If it's in the morning, put it in early morning mode. Like it should be able to do that for me automatically. Like that would be amazing. Additionally, in the United States at least, for baseball, America's worst pastime, we've actually rolled out to all MLB stadiums, or at least the majority of the MLB stadiums there, into their application. So remember, the application has to be installed, so normal attendees that don't have the application aren't getting notified, but they're getting location-based awareness of multiple things, like queues in lines, queues in the toilets, like how long, how many people are in there, congestion, like if there's any current coupons going on in their area. As they walk around the park, they're getting notified of how close or far away they are, because doing GPS with that many people obviously can cause an issue, because getting cell reception in general. But having this application that knows, hey, I just entered the New York Yankee Stadium, and I can direct you towards your seat because I know where you sit, I can tell you which way to go, is pretty amazing in general when we think about that. I think department stores, that's like the dead giveaway. In fact, a lot of retail stores, the Apple Store, Macy's, and a bunch of other ones in the United States have rolled it out. I'm not too familiar with who's rolled out technology here. I think grocery stores would be amazing analysis of finding where and how long I'm spending in different regions and target me based on that. But I think obviously like frequent shoppers, imagine that you track a user every time they enter your department store or a specialty shop or a coffee shop, and they don't have to like stamp card or punch card anything. It's just in the application. Like you're good to go. And it can even say goodbye when you're done. I use it at our developer conference, Xamarin Evolve. I built out an iOS, Android, and Windows application. I'll talk about the Windows bit of it. But I created an interactive scavenger hunt. So what we did is we had these little things that our design team made. And we had Eskimo Ibeacon stuck all over the conference. And there's 12 mini quests that you had to perform. And they gave you a picture, and then it gave you a little clue text of where to go. Now, when you found a beacon, you were then prompted with like a history question or a little task that you could do, like put on Google Glass or cardboard or do something and do a mini hack, which is really cool to progress through the game. And at the very end, you got a reward, a little Xamarin monkey with a Evolve 2014 t-shirt on, which was really cool. So all my back-end logic, tying up to Azure, pulling down all of the different information and the rewards, was all shared, and then I built out a unique user interface, used core location, and then on Android, what I'm about to talk about, I use the Eskimo SDK. Like this is an awesome example of something kind of fun as we're at a conference that we can do, and you can get notified of how close or far away you are based on this information, which is really cool. Like cool, like scrolling interactive map, which is really awesome. So tons of use cases for them, to be honest. So some things that are new, I guess iOS 7.1 isn't that new per se, but of interest here in 7.0 they didn't add background notifications or location permissions. In 7.0 it was just built in, it just worked. In iOS 7.1 it would automatically prompt up the permission for you. So as developers we didn't have to worry about it. In iOS 8 though, it was all this opt-in feature that we're talking about. So they can opt into the location awareness or out of it. One really cool thing is they added an enhanced lock screen. Let me see if it actually shows up on here. Oh, this is cool. Well, it's actually working. They added lock screen support. So if you're getting notified, we can actually see it way down at the bottom. One of my applications that I'm running down here is actually getting notified that some things are going on. The region's been notifying about the lock screen, and it'll show your actual application. So if you're getting close to an Apple store and you have the Apple Store app, it'll actually put the icon up there. And if you swipe up, it'll actually launch the application that's there. And that just comes for free. You don't have to do anything, just because as you're doing the scanning in the background at least. Let me go ahead. There's my password. It's my sister's birthday. Perfect. Cool. There's that. There's that. They also added an indoor location tracking API. I haven't really messed around with it. Estimote has their own. I haven't really seen what it's good for or what's the use case there, but it's in the actual SDK of iOS 8. Like I said, the gotchas here are this. It literally says, do you want to allow your location while you use this app, or in the background is the other one. So you have to really give them a really good reason for doing this. In this instance of the Evolve Quest application, I not only supported Ibeacon support, which made it really easy for someone just to get in the region of the beacon and find it. I also added QR code bar scanning, so we can see each of these things also have a QR code, so I can support Windows Phone. We're a cross-platform company, got to support them all. But in instance, if someone said don't allow, then I told them, hey, you can't scan for beacons, are you sure? You can always scan the QR code. So some people accidentally hit don't allow, they don't even read the notification, so be aware of that. Again, in Core Location Manager, there's when in use, always in use based on your use case. In this instance, I did everything in the foreground, so only when in use. It's a little bit less scary of a notification. And again, you have to go to your info plist and make sure you add that flag. Very important. And the string, whatever you want to display, which is right underneath the scarier one.
Is that the same for the map, for the TPS?
It is. It's exactly the same for the map. So also for map, so I actually wrote a whole blog post on this, because I first wrote it about iOS 8 Ibeacon scanning. Then someone said, it's also for map, and I said, oh, I should probably update this blog post. Because when you actually call Locationmanager request, if you want to put the dot on maps in Apple Maps, it's the same exact thing. So you also have to add this flag. So it's not just Ibeacon specific, this is core location specific. So my assumption is that the Apple Maps kit, the Maps kit or whatever, uses the same API under the hood, and they require the same exact call. It would have been really nice if it was a separate message, but it is not. So yeah, it's unfortunate. Cool. So when it comes to, that's all of iOS for when it comes to iBeacons. Android is really cool. It's actually not built into the SDK or API at all. Bluetooth Low Energy exists, but it does not exist in the Android API. It just doesn't exist. So a bunch of vendors who create beacons obviously want developers to create cross-platform applications. So they've released their own SDKs that sit on top of the Android 4.3 Bluetooth Low Energy stack. One slide that I didn't go in here is talk about how Bluetooth Low Energy works. It's extremely boring, and it's like really complex. So let these guys handle the complexities for you, and let's just get a nice API that sits on top of it. So that's what they've created. The nice thing here is that any of the SDKs work with any beacons because they're all generic based on this UUID. None of them hard-coded their beacon, their UUID into it, but they follow the same exact process that there's the UUID, major number, and minor number. So let's take a look at Android. Cool. Because I think it's kind of cool to kind of show everywhere where it's working. So what I'm going to do here is get a few devices set up. Now I'm using just a Moto G. This is a super inexpensive device in the States, at least. It's about $50 US. And it has Bluetooth Low Energy, quad-core processor. It's my ultimate Android dev device. You don't need anything super crazy expensive for an ultimate dev device. And I'm going to use a screen mirroring tool, Droid at Screen. It's extremely slow. It's just doing snapshots. So it may look like it's lagging up, but it's actually just a screen mirroring tool. Unfortunately, it hasn't been upgraded to Lollipop, so I can't take advantage of a lot of the cool new APIs. So, but that's there. And so you can see if I scroll, it's pretty chunky. But for this demo, it'll work just great. So I'm going to come over here, and we're going to switch to our Android demo. Now, if you're inside of Android Studio or Eclipse, and you're using Maven or something like that, Estimode, I'm using the Estimode SDK. They have packages that you just add, just your jars, and it's exposed open. It's on their GitHub. Now we expose that to developers as a component. So it's we have components and NuGets, for instance, and when you search for Estimode on here, you'll see the Estimode SDK comes up, and there's a full example, everything like that. It tells you that it requires 4.3, and it gives you a sample of how to run the actual source code. So that's how you add it. It's actually just a NuGet package over there. So that's how we expose it to developers. There's a few things on how these component vendors bundled up the Android bits, which is they implemented the background as a background service automatically. So in that instance, you got to come into your little preface here, is you have to come into your Android manifest file, and you have to do a few things. Now, in the absolute minimum requirement is that you implement this Beacon service, which you can see it's the Estimode SDK Beacon service, and export it. So this allows our application to talk to the Beacon service that's being bundled into the SDK. So that's pretty simple. And you're going to have a few different permission flags: Bluetooth, Bluetooth admin. Bluetooth admin only if you want to use the SDK to turn on Bluetooth. There's actually a little API that enables you to do it. And the phone state, I think, is required in theirs. Now, in this instance, their SDK allows you to detect if Bluetooth is on the device, if Bluetooth Low Energy is on the device, if it's on, everything like that to switch it on, and you can handle that in your code. I'm not in this instance. Now, if you want to have an app that only is Ibeacon based, you can obviously do that on Android by flipping this flag, the uses feature. Google exposed it as Android hardware Bluetooth LE. You still have to handle the case of if it's on or off, but you don't have to handle the case of does this device have Bluetooth Low Energy. On iOS, we just kind of get away with it, but in the wonderful world of Android, it's my favorite platform. So in the wonderful world of Android, where anything is possible, we have to do a little bit more detection. So be aware of that, and what this is going to be used for is for Google Play or any other app store will not show your application to the users that do not have Bluetooth Low Energy on their device. So kind of be aware of that. Well, I'm going to turn it off just for funsies. So I'm going to look at my layouts here, and we'll pull up our Android XML. If you've never done Android development, it's all XML based, which is pretty cool. I love it. This is our beautiful user interface. We have two text views, one for beacons found and one's for accuracy that's going to be displayed. Nothing too crazy there. So if you're using Xamarin and doing Android, it's exactly the same. This is our beautiful user interface. Lovely. In our main activity, this code at least needs a context of some sort, your application context, your service context. I'm implementing it here in my main activity. All this code's done, so we don't have to write anything from scratch. But I'll walk through it. You're going to have to first implement the service ready callback. So what happens here with these services is you basically are sending an intent down to the Estimode service to make sure that it's started up and say, I would like to start, you should start scanning right now. You should boot your service up. So it's an active service that runs in the background. And then when you implement this, so if we go to the declaration here, we can see what it actually has. It has one method, on service ready. So you can use this flag to say, did the actual service start up on the device? That's all this does. So once it gets started, you get a notification back to your main activity that the service is started up, and it starts up immediately, to be honest. And then at that point, that's when you can start ranging or monitoring for regions. So you can't do it instantly if the service isn't running. So this is going to look very familiar. I have a beacon region. In this instance, it's an Estimote region. Instead of using core location, since core location and my location manager don't exist, we're using a beacon manager from the Estimote SDK. Then we can also see that I have the same UUID. You can enter your major and minor numbers. In this instance, I'm just scanning for all beacons. So here I create my new beacon manager. I create a region, and it has the same exact overrides, but actually in a different order. The unique ID is that com.whatever that's not used at all. The proximity ID is the ID. And we can see that it's not exposed as an NS UUID or anything like that. It's exposed as a string. There's a major and minor number, which in our binding just happen to be Java-lang integers. And I'm passing a null here if we're not using them. So I'm going to do find views by IDs. That's fine. And then in this instance, this is the exact same code that we saw. I'm actually going to change the background to white by default and change it to blue, yellow, or green based on the proximity here. In this instance, it happens not to be an enum. It's just an integer or something like that. So we just have to do an else if instead of a switch case. But one thing that's not built into the Estimote SDK, all the SDKs are a little bit different, is they have a little utilities method that you can use to compute proximity or compute accuracy. My assumption is that they're doing this is that it is a little bit more intensive for them to actually calculate these. So they don't want to calculate them automatically for you every single time. So they have a little external utility that you have to call. So in this instance, I can say, give me the current proximity and see if it's far, near, or immediate. Again, they mimic the iOS API one-to-one. And then additionally, what I'm going to do here is get the distance, and then we're good to go. Now notice I didn't start ranging, didn't do anything, because I have to wait for my on-service ready implementation to get called. And when that's done, all I do is call start ranging. It looks exactly the same as iOS, and I'm good to go. Besides for the fact that when I get undestroyed or when I'm on pause, I disconnect from the beacon manager, so that stops the service in the background. And the one important call, you can do it on the end of onCreate, but I always do it on resume. So if I navigate to and from a view, this will get called again. I call beacon manager connect, which then will call my start ranging. So it's like this weird flow of onCreate, on resume, connect, on service ready, start ranging. So not as nice as iOS, but it totally works great. So let's go ahead and run this code, and we'll just see what it looks like here. Get package name. Oh, I most likely modified something in my Android manifest file. That's very upset with me. There we go. Perfect. So again, we're using the same beacons, so you can use the same beacons, everything like that. And this will go ahead and boot it up over here on Android. So there we go. As I get closer, I'm getting the same exact notifications. I think on Android, the actual distance isn't super accurate just because how the Bluetooth stack was enabled. So on Android, I really recommend not relying on that at all so much. I do recommend just as close or far away as you are, but as we can see, it's updating based on the different Bluetooth stacks and how often this is actually updating. But it's relatively quick. iOS seems a little bit faster, but it's pretty great. Same exact code, same exact logic. The nice thing now is then you could call and do whatever you want when you get into here. So we'll see. There we go. So the next thing I want to do, because that's Android, it's pretty generic. It's all about what you can do with these things. What I think is really interesting, especially on Android Wear, how many of you have done Android Wear development yet? Guess what? If you've done Android development, you already have. It's the exact same thing, just with a different UI. In fact, Android Wear and the wearables are all based on Bluetooth Low Energy. Every single Android Wear and Apple Watch device, for that matter, has Bluetooth Low Energy baked right in. This is the LG G Watch. It's kind of the developer device because it has a nice USB dock, which enables us to debug over USB, which is really cool. What I love about this is that it's just running Android 5.1, the latest version of Lollipop. And the amazing thing about Android and Android Wear is it's just Android. The entire API is available to you. So I actually have an Android Wear application right here. And inside of my Android Wear application, I have a main activity. And this is going to blow your minds, hopefully. I have a service called ReadyBack. I have my UUIDs. I have the exact same code for ranging and monitoring on service ready. It's just an activity that's going to get run. And I'm going to change the background and show how many beacons are found. It's the same exact code. I can execute all of my code, Java, C# code, right on the watch. It's a magical, lovely experience. So let me just do this here. And now we should hopefully see, there it is. I don't know what it's, whoa. I don't know what it thought I said. Android. So I already have it running here. So here it is. It takes a little bit to actually get, but now it's actually using just Bluetooth Low Energy, not talking to the device. It knows, this application knows nothing about this device at all. It's just literally talking directly to my actual, over Bluetooth right here. You can get the accuracy, everything that you could get on the actual watch. So now if you're creating a scavenger hunt game, maybe you just scan for the beacons on your wearable device to get closer. They don't even have to bust out their phone from their device. They put it on there, you give them the next quest. That's an amazing experience. Of course, you want to make sure that you keep the screen unlocked for a certain amount of time if you want in Android Wear, or else the system kills it after 5 seconds if you don't interact with it. But that's pretty cool. The same code, the same logic, just running on iOS, Android, Windows Phone, just a different SDK. Really cool. So kind of next, what I think is that's the beginning of iBeacons. iBeacons have been around since iOS 7, so they've been around for a few years now when you think about them. But what I think is really cool is the potential of what Bluetooth Low Energy devices can do next and what kind of context they can bring to our applications. Now, Estimote, which you're seeing here, these little guys, these are their main beacons, and these are about $30 a piece. Beacons cost anywhere from $10 to $30, depending on what type you're getting. These are about $30 a piece per se, and they last up to like 3 years or so. They've come up with a new product called Estimote stickers. And the idea here is that with traditional beacons, you're mostly going to set them on a wall and forget them, is the idea. The idea of stickers, why I find them so interesting, is that they want you to stick these to something that's being moved around. So for instance, a car, a bike, a shoe, for instance, that's there. Now these devices are specific. They have their own SDK and API available for them, but they're a little bit different than actual what iBeacons themselves are. So they're a special API, special protocol that Estimote created, and they're a lot cheaper. These are 10 for $100 US, so about $10 a piece there. So in general, like I said, they're a device. This is very similar to iOS. They're a device, and you can turn any object to ennearables. You could just stick them there as well. Not a big deal. The idea is that they're so small that you could have someone carrying them around. And I'll give you an amazing use case of this app I started building. They have an ARM MO Cortex processor in them. Additionally, since it's their own hardware, their own API, they put an motion sensor and a temperature sensor right into this little tiny thing, which is mind-blowing, and a battery somehow. And like, it's only bits and pieces of it. Like, it's tiny. It's also an API. It's built into the Estimote SDK for iOS, either in Objective-C Swift or C#. And then the API is a little bit different. They're not based on major numbers or minor numbers. It's just each one of these has one unique ID that you can set. It also has a type. So by default, they have little icons on them. So this is a chair, and this is a car, and this is exposed in the API that you can set. And they also have colors that you can detect, obviously. Or you can just scan for everything. So there's a sticker type and an ID assigned to this. So kind of like a UUID and a major number, if you will. The API also has this advanced trigger system that I'll talk about, which is really cool. So some examples of what you might do with this, for instance, maybe you stick these to your flower pot. Now, it's not actually moving at all, but you might move it around your house. And maybe you create an application that detects and says, hey, you're close to the water. Did you water it today? And tracks the last time you actually watered it. It was 2 days ago, and how much water based on this specific one. What's interesting in this use case is that you could also put a beacon on there, but these little guys are all about close proximity. If you had you could even see if it's baked in the sun, how hot it is right now, which is really cool because it'd be baking in the sensor. So you can add this different information into your application. Shove it onto a laptop if you want. For me, and a great use case of this is that I travel a lot for work. I do like 100 some odd presentations a year all over the place. And I'm always shoving stuff into my backpack, which is somewhere. I never know where it's at. What I thought would be great is what if I was to take these little stickers and put them on the most important objects to me. So my device bag, my laptop, my camera, for instance. And I created an application. I started it. You guys can steal it if you want. I called it Packed It. If I just hold my iPhone over my bag and it tells me if everything's in it. That'd be pretty cool. So that's another use case, just automatically because they're all just right inside of there. So it's a familiar API. It's going to look exactly the same of what we just looked like. And if you're doing Objective-C or Swift, it's the same exact API. The difference here is that these are called nearables. So instead of creating a location manager, you create a nearable manager. You still have to call your always authorization type stuff on iOS. Also, this is only iOS. I believe they do plan on doing an Android SDK at some point, but it's only iOS right now. In this instance, you create a nearable manager. You say ranged nearables. You get your callback. You get an array of nearables back. And you can start ranging or stop ranging, just like we did on the actual the Ibeacons, which is cool. Region monitoring is also built in, so you can get in contact when you're getting close to these. Again, exactly the same. The difference here, I should say, is this one thing. When you say start monitoring, there is no regions. There's no regions when it comes to Nearable. So you either pass it an identifier number or a type. So you could say only range or monitor for all the chairs, or you could say all, everything in the area. So that enables you to finite down like it's a region. So instead of doing start monitoring for a region, you're monitoring for an identifier or for a type. But in this case here, we're saying entered identifier region and exited identifier region. You could pop up a local notification, and that's what it says by ID or by type. So what's really cool is that you get a lot of toys that's built into the API. You can see if the device is moving. You can see how long it's been moving for. You get to see how long it was moving for, if it stopped moving. I think it's in milliseconds. You can see the orientation of the device. So is it upright? Is it this way? Is it that way? That's really cool. You get the acceleration currently, if it's the X, Y, and Z. So if you had it in a shoe, you can actually see which way they're moving and how track that information. Additionally, in the API, this is all in the API that's returned. You get the temperature, and you get the color, and you get the type if it was a bike, car, and the identifier information as well. So with Ibeacons, you're getting very small bits of information. These little guys here are actually exposing more information because it's their own API. I think also they're smaller range, so you can't really control how far away range they are. I would say they're probably somewhere in like the 30 meters, something like that. Yeah, question?
I just thought about airlines. What do they say to these transmitters in your luggage?
That's a good question. I carry them on me when I came over on British Airlines. So they're all Bluetooth Low Energy. They do say that when your phone goes into airplane mode, it definitely turns off Bluetooth. I turn it right back on because I have wireless headphones for short flights. I don't know. They haven't said anything yet, so that's good. They probably, honestly, if you put going through my bag, this is just in my normal bag. I don't think they know what it is. If they took it out, they would ask me, but they haven't said anything yet, so that's good. Now, ideally, these nearables will probably be with you around. It's not like they have an active Bluetooth scanner, like, oh no, is this emitting Bluetooth gamma rays? Like, no. So I think you're probably fine, at least for now. Now, at least in the States, we have the worst. TSA is the worst in the States. They have no idea what they're doing. They probably couldn't even describe what this is to them. So.
Is it possible to recharge battery inside?
So that's a good question. With the Ibeacons themselves, the Estimate ones don't. Some other ones do. Some are USB powered. These guys, no, you can't recharge them at all. They're like a little cell phone battery. You could always slice it open and replace it. That's not great. So these guys here last for about a year. That's their current range on them. Estimote is able to upgrade the firmware of them, so you can actually take these beacons, put it on their application, and update the firmware. And they've extended the battery life with different protocols that way. But as far as I know right now, once they're dead, they're dead. There's no way to recharge them. I'd imagine in the future what would be really cool is if there was a tiny rechargeable battery that you put on a mat or something like that. But as far as right now, it's still in developer mode at this point, so there's no way to recharge them. But they do say a year is what they're estimating on battery life, which isn't bad. So this really cool proximity or trigger system. So you have not only ranging and monitoring like we saw on Ibeacons, but we have this trigger system. So they have a proximity rule. This is kind of like a region monitoring. We get notified in the background when something happens. So you can do proximity ruling. So you can say, based on range, let me get a notification. So not just when I enter a region, but only when I'm immediate or where I'm far away. For instance, you might say, when I'm close to the car, let me get a notification there, because I put the car nearable on it. Motion, you can get a notification when this beacon or this sticker starts moving. Orientation, so all the different properties you can get rotation-wise and get notified in real time. So instead of having to actively scan for things over and over again, just notify me when something changes. Temperature, and then also a date rule. So built into their SDK and API, you can say, you know what? Actually, the example is here. They say, let me do this like forgot bag trigger. And the instance here is I'm going to create a set of rules for when I leave in the morning and I get into my car. Make sure that I have my bag because I have the bag nearable in there. So my car is one of these, and then over here in my bag is one of these. So I create 3 rules. I create a day rule that says, I usually leave between 6 a.m. and 9 a.m. So really only make this trigger available for those 3 hours in my application. And then I say, let me create a proximity rule. In this case, it's when I'm on my bike, I don't own a car. In Seattle, at least. Some zip cars here and there. But when I'm in range of this beacon, let me get a notification. And at the same time, if I'm outside of my bag region or my bag type, that's when I want to get a notification. So when all 3 of these are true, notify me. Not when one of them is, when all 3. So now what I do is I create a trigger. So I have my rules, I put them in a trigger. It's all 3 different rule types here. And you can specify a specific trigger ID, so you could bundle up multiple triggers. This is just like that com.xamarin, just ID so you know. And then you simply create a trigger manager instead of a nearable manager. Create a trigger manager, and you say start monitoring for this trigger. And then you get a callback whenever that change states. So when it was true and it turns to false, so one of these is false, for instance, you're good to go. So let's actually take a look at some of these stickers that are there. So what I'm going to do here is pull up first the code in C#, and then we'll take a look at it in Objective-C. So there's my nearables demo. So inside of here, when I actually monitor, we saw kind of exactly what this looks like. In this instance, well, that's the range. Let me find my demos, cloud. There's so many of them. Nearables. There we go. So in this instance here, what I'm doing is I'm simply creating a new nearable manager, and then I say whenever I range any beacons, let me go update this list that I have here. So this is returning an array of nearables types of all these little guys that are here. And when a view did appear, I simply say, let me start ranging for all. This is an enum, so if I came in here and say I only want bag, bed, chair type specifically, I could do that. And then I just have a little data source here, my UI table view data source, where I update the cell with information. And we can see what that looks like. Let's see here. Nearables. Not that one, this one. So here, for instance, I actually have tons of them all inside here. So there's tens in here. So they're all pulling up here. But we can see that the actual the car is going to be the closest on here. And I still get that near, far, immediate type information. If this is going to update, it's definitely near. Should be immediate at some point. But it's all going to update if I tap on one of them. So which one did I do? Oh, I should look at which one I pressed. Let me do the car while I get in there. There we go. So now what I've done down here at the bottom, I'll just zoom in on this information so we can take a look at it close up, is we have a bunch of different information coming back that I pulled in. So we can take a look at like is moving. So if I actually stop it here and I'm ranging now in full time, there we go, it's moved to false. It's horizontal orientation. If I point it up, it's moved to unknown because I moved it vertical. I can see different battery voltage levels. If I move this really fast, I keep going. Ideally, the motion state duration will keep going up. 6 seconds, et cetera, when I stop, moves back, and I get that information there. So you can do immediate tracking with this information that you're pulling in real time that's there, which is really cool. Additionally, down at the bottom, I have like the X and Y and Z acceleration somewhere in the temperature. So we see it's 23 Celsius right now. I'm pretty sure they put it in Celsius, I'm assuming. Does that seem right? 23? I'm not sure what the conversion is. One day I'll figure that out. But you get all that information in there as well, which is really cool. Now, this one, if I move up, let's see if I have it set to exit and enter the region. So let's see if it says entered region. So let's see if I move it, how far away it's actually going. We'll try to leave. We'll see. It's pretty powerful. Let's see. Hold that up next. We'll see. Move way over there. How did that go? Did it work?
Nothing changed.
Nothing changed. Great. So I'm really not sure how far away these things go, but it's obviously more than that distance, which is pretty cool. So you get notifications, and it crashed, so that's good. Perfect. Maybe it did it, and then I have some bug in my code. That could be. So, all right, what I really like to show then is the trigger system. So, well, actually, let's look at that code in Objective-C, just so you can see that it's totally Objective-C, and it totally works. They have a Swift library as well. How many of you have done Swift yet? Nothing? It's just like C# and F#, but like really early and not as good. So they're getting there. It's really cool though. You should check it out if you're an Objective-C developer. Everything that I just showed you in the C# world, it looks very close to that. So this is going to look very familiar. This is their Narrable Manager. We can see we just have a property. We're allocating things here. There's our Narrable Manager, Narrable Array. It's an NS array that's coming back. That's how they exposed it in their API. They're registering their class for cell reuse. This is all going to look familiar to you guys. Here, for instance, they do have a delegate that they've implemented, the Narrable delegate down here. And that's all they're doing is setting the array, telling the table view to reload, and then they're parsing that same information. My sample is a port of their sample because I created the binding for this. But you can see a little bit intricacies difference in the actual API of which ones look nice. So, but that's it. It's pretty straightforward. It's a very simple API, and when it comes to triggers, it's the same way. When you download the Estimate SDK, you have the option to download the Swift version, Objective-C version, or R version in C#. So kind of for anyone. Yeah. So let me go to the triggers demo. There's a few different triggers demos that I have in here. And the first one I want to pull up here is I enabled this application. Has a little, actually let me just run it. And what I'm saying is, I'm going to use the car as an example for this one, is I want to only get a trigger notification when I'm in a horizontal mode. So I create my trigger with one rule. I create my new trigger manager. If it's null, I start monitoring it. And then every single time I get a change, so whenever it changes orientation back to horizontal, I want to just do a date time string there. So let me go ahead and run this here on the device. This one's already should be. Let me rerun it again. Make sure it has the latest code. And again, this code can actually be run just like our region monitoring and be run in the background, which is pretty cool. There we go. Yeah. It's not the one I want. It's going to build it up here. And then what we can do is, our next example, we'll actually play around with multiple rule types. If it builds. Favorite part of demos, stuff built-in. Gotta have it. It's an essential part of every demo. It's a good time to get more water. Boom. Any questions while this is building?
Since you put in IDs,
Mm-hmm.
you can only put in one ID. So
Yeah, you can only put one in at a time. So you're either ranging for a specific type, which could be, there could be multiple of the same type that you assign, or a specific ID. So you can only pass in one ID in their API, which kind of stinks. Yeah, it's kind of like a specific region, really. So here I have this. So I have like a little picker. So we'll do car, because the car has a car on it. I'll enable it. So at some point here, I should get, if I lay it horizontal, I get a notification because that's been triggered. If I move it back up and then move it back down from 29, it should go to 34. But what I think is really cool in this instance here is that I could create another rule. So let me say var rule 2. And I almost think of it of this amazing example of, what if I was creating a child's game where I was putting these on like blocks and pieces and they needed to put them in a specific orientation. Like this is the perfect tools to enable you to do this, create some fun interactive game. So I'm gonna say, what if I do this vertical, and I want now I can pass an identifier, so a single identifier or a type, but I'll say, let me do nearable type dot, we'll make this the chair specifically. So our trigger now will only get called if our car, which I'll pick from here, is going to be horizontal, and then vertical for our actual chair that is here, which is really cool. Now, of course, you can create multiple in your nearable managers and your trigger managers. You can start ranging multiple things all at the same time. This didn't work because my IntelliSense kicked in a little bit too late. So let's actually add rule 2 in here. Just add it to the array. So we're building this up. Now, you can have multiple triggers at the same time, multiple region monitoring at the same time. Usually what I would say is on like the first view where you're scanning for everything, you scan for all types. And when you select one, you actually you're only really scanning for that one specific beacon there or whatever. So it would be nice if you could do like, if you could actually do like a specific number as the beginning or something like that, but they didn't put that in the API yet. Cool. This is going to deploy a lot faster now, so that's good. Not this one. Cool. So now they're both horizontal. We're going to pick our car there, enable that. And now I can actually go ahead and like put the car or the chair, hopefully, there we go, straight up. If I put it back down, then it'll stop getting updates and then back up again. The same thing, if these are both not true, then it actually won't update it at all based on these numbers. So every single time I'm actually modifying these and changing them, I'm getting notification nearly in real time. It's pretty close to being near real time, which is really cool. But then I could actually come back into my code, and there's all sorts of rules. So if I created another rule 3 and did a rule type, there's a proximity rule, the orientation rule, the nearable rule, and temperature rule. So I could say only do this, but only when it's some specific temperature, which I think is pretty much really awesome in there. So you have Ibeacons, which are kind of, you're going to place them, set them, and forget them, and you're going to get probably more accurate numbers as far as accuracy and the information that's there. And it's really more about those regions. So you have the specific UUID, major number, minor number. These are more they're small, tiny, putting them everywhere, but they give you more information. So they're kind of two different ways to build out applications. The difference here is that, remember, nearables at this point are only iOS, the stickers, whereas beacons themselves, the actual SDKs exist on Android and iOS. But I think both of them are extremely interesting based on your use cases. So I have a bunch of resources. All these slides are going to be available. They should already be online, hopefully. I sent them to Chris last week. I have tons of different examples. The entire source code, where it's iOS, Android Wear, is all available on my GitHub. On my GitHub, you'll find everything that I ever do in life. Everything I do is open source. Every app that I've ever done. Our Xamarin Evolve Quest application is also open source. For some reason, I put it on here. But if you go to our blog and type in Ibeacon or Evolve Quest, that entire application is all open source. On there, we have different samples of getting up and running. We called it Find the Monkey because our mascot is a monkey, of how to do this actually on iOS, Android, and Google Glass. We did it on Google Glass, which is pretty mind-blowing. And if I actually pull up the GitHub for Evolve Quest, I'll show you how this is. So inside of here, you have our Evolve Quest app, Android, iOS, Windows Phone, all the game data. and all of our shared codes. If you're a Xamarin developer and want to see how you're doing this, or if you're just doing iOS or Android and Objective-C or Java, it also applies. So you can actually see how I actually architected the code when views appeared, when they didn't appear, and how I'm pulling down the data from the server, which is really cool. Because obviously all my shared code in this instance knows nothing about beacons, but I think what you can do in this case that I did in here was, this is my quest beacon. So much code. So this is kind of the code to look at. Like this is shared code, and this is what you would do. Once you have the major and minor numbers, for instance, I had a magical number that was like 9999 and 1000, and I did something based on this special beacon there, or else I just started parsing and doing different information here based on the major and minor numbers that were in my current quest. So you had to find 1 to 3 different beacons. And then you update your user interface. So it's kind of a really cool example of how you can get up and running, and all the source code is open source for the Evolve Quest, which is really nice. I have business cards if you guys want to contact me in any way. I'm mostly found on Twitter at James Montemagno. It's my name. Couldn't have made it any easier. If you search for me on Google, you'll find me, not my father, of the same name. He hid from the internet. I expose myself everywhere with my clothes on. Obviously, that would be inappropriate any other way, but I'm everywhere. I love to code. I love talking about this stuff. I love talking about beacons and iOS and Android, no matter what technology you guys are using. If you guys have any questions, I'm here, but thank you, and I hope you guys loved it. Any questions?
Are they waterproof?
What was that?
Are they waterproof?
Are they waterproof? That's a good question. I'm pretty sure that these ones are. So if you guys want to take a look at these, I can pass them around actually. So these ones are all 100% like encoded in like silicone of some sort. Like they're pretty interesting. So I'll get another one and bring it over here so you guys can take a look at them. And so they have a little sticky side to them in general. So you guys can pass them around back and forth. So I think those are waterproof. I don't know specifically on the Estimo website if they say they are. I'm pretty sure these are not. They're more of a hard plastic on the outside. But the nice thing, at least with Ibeacons, there's so many vendors, I guarantee there's one out there that probably is making a waterproof one. Yeah.
And this sticker site is something that will not be stick for some time. If you put to one wall, after that to another, maybe an 10 wall will not.
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I found at least. There's one of them. I think the car one isn't sticky anymore. This one now, at this point, I've taken it on and off so much it kind of sticks. Actually, it sticks fairly well. The first time I did it though, you had to yank it off super hard. The stickers, not so much. But these Estimo, when you get them, they have a really hard plastic sheet over them that you take off. Once you put them on, they're not coming off. But ideally, you could always replace the sticker with something else too, I guess, the actually sticky part. But they're relatively pretty stuck on. I haven't even removed these, so it's not like they're gonna come off at all. So, yeah.
Are they quite rare? Are they used a lot, the stickers?
So the stickers are extremely rare. I was one of the very first ones to get them, so you guys are probably some of the very first ones to actually hold them in your hands in the UK. They've only sent out a few hundred development kits at this point. They're starting them now in mass production. So when you go to their website, I still think it's in pre-order queue, so you can actually detect them and pull them down. So yeah, they are quite rare at this point. Yeah. I don't have a really good way of, if I wanted to give away one, who would be the one to give it to? That'd be very unfair. So what I can do is you guys will all get a number. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Remember your number. And we can do this. I can give away one because I definitely need a bunch of them. And we'll go random.org. This is as fair as I can think I can do it. Minimum number is 1. Maximum number 10. I'll give away 2. You guys are super lucky right now. Feeling really good. All right, ready? You guys all remember your number? I don't. 7. 2. All right. So we'll bring them all back up, and then I'll let you pick specifically which one you want. So did everyone get to feel them and check them out? And what I can do is, if you email me, they have a back end for their website. So if you want to come up and pick one out, you actually can register for their website and see which one you want. And we'll do one more. Same numbers though. 7 again. Not super. You don't get another one. 9. Cool. So when you go to, there's a backend too. So cloud.estimote.com. So Estimote, if I can remember my password. Yeah, they're pretty stuck, so you can just take it off. Yeah. So this is the backend for their system. Each different beacon kind of manufacturer has a different backend. This enables you to kind of manage all of your beacons. So here I can actually see the dog, fridge, car, and the identifiers here. So it's not like I need to scan to get them. And then I can actually modify some settings if they let me. So I can change the name of them. I think they're going to have this updatable for me at some point in the future. These were like super early that are there. And then each beacon, for instance here, I can actually detect, and it'll tell me which beacon version, and I can get analytics. They have analytics in their SDK, so I could actually see, I haven't tied it in yet, but you could actually add analytics. And then there's app information. So when you're using the Estimote SDK for Nearables, to grab additional information, you can actually query this information off the back end. You can use your app ID and app token, and that's actually found inside of your app delegate. So here's your app delegate here. There's a little initialization code. You don't need it to run the application, but you use your app ID and app token, and that's for the Estimote beacons or the Nearables. And what you do is you can say, give me a list of all of my beacons online right now. So this could be really cool if you're building an application for a company or a store. You've registered all the beacons with them. You could let them do a setup process for each beacon, so you don't have to actively scan for them. You just go and grab the beacons online, which is really cool in general. So and then there's a little bit of a code. They have a little async await method that says, just give me all my Nearables. Actually, that one's not enabled because their API has a bug in it. But for Estimotes, that API doesn't exist. I filed the bug in their Objective-C code. So I think they fixed it now. So, but it's kind of cool. You can tie up to the back end and get specific information on it. And then you can also transfer and do things like that as well, which is cool. But you guys have some stuff to play around with. If you guys have an amazing DevWeek, I have business cards if you guys want to contact me, else just my name. And thank you so much.